welcome to BrickSide Chat, where we take your questions and turn them into conversations. I'm Paul.
And I'm Evan.
And today we're going to be talking about efficiency, or really how to reduce the amount of wasted time in your business and therefore save some money.
Exactly. And there's a lot of things that over the past few years we have done and not done that we've kind of realized within the past year or so, probably. I'd say roughly that we kind of needed to start doing for certain things to become more efficient, where it kind of made more sense with how we operated versus kind of that thought process of like,
come in, have some fun, go home.
Exactly. We were having fun more so than we were actually efficiently running a store.
Yeah. So there's going to be a couple things on here that we have, just a little bit of a disclaimer, that we have not implemented ourselves, but are researching how to implement and stuff like that. So not everything on here is going to be tried and true. I have little notes to make sure that we say that if we haven't tested it. But just I wanted to get that out of the way. So just for safety. But there are some things that we have implemented and that we think are applicable to basically any kind of business that you're running. Obviously, we run a Lego store and we deal with physical goods, and we have a lot of unskilled or partially skilled labor in our business. If you're running a software company or something where it's a very skilled labor.
Cabinet maker.
Evan really wants to be a cabinet maker, I guess.
Apparently.
Then you might have, there might not be some things here that are going to perfectly line up, but hopefully it can at least serve as some kind of inspiration. So one thing that we have really tried to do, and this was kind of from the very beginning, is we have a lot of stuff. And as someone who is very messy, I tend to lose a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And the issue is when I lose something that isn't my property, it's a bit bigger deal than if I misplace my own stuff. Something that we have implemented is trying to make sure that everything that is in our store within reason has a location where it belongs.
Yeah, it has a home that it can go back to in the event of it being removed from that place.
Yes. If you've followed our channel on YouTube, we have done shipping station videos before where we talk about our shipping station. And for those of you who have not seen the videos, first of all, go watch the video. Second of all, every box size has a little slot. So 4x4s and 6x6x4s and etc. all go in their own little designated thing. So that way, when we're shipping, we can really quickly pull them out, and if we waste a box or whatever, we can put it back. Something that has always been a problem, and one of the main reasons why we implemented this, is the counter space.
Yes, forever issues. We have a counter space. Again, if you've seen the videos, you know what we're talking about. It's a big butcher block counter, but we always are out of space on that counter for a variety of reasons. For a long period of time, it was mostly just because we would just put stuff on the counter and leave it there for days because it didn't have a home, and eventually we decided, okay, that's part of the reason we decided everything needed a home, mostly because we were really out of space and stuff was just so unorganized. But yeah, the counter space has always been an issue because it's pretty critical in what we do, because obviously it's a very physical, hands-on type thing. So whether we have to pour pieces out to verify an order, or we're pouring bags out to organize bags, or whatever we're doing, you need that counter space. So it's good to organize stuff. And the shipping station was a great example of getting stuff off of what was our counter at the time and putting it in a designated place at the shipping station. It's deep, so it holds a lot of stuff, and it doesn't take up much room. And it took all of that stuff that at one point was sitting on a wire mesh rack thing / the counter, and it took it all off the counter, and it gave us all that counter space up there.
Yeah, and we use that counter space all the time because I haven't really seen this a lot in our Discord. Most people seem to keep a pretty clean shop, but if you have stuff everywhere, besides just not knowing where something is, you're also going to run the thing of, well, what if I now need a whole counter to count out 7,000 bricks for us, or, fix something or something like that.
Right.
And that space is just not there. That's going to slow you down, and it might cause you to miss getting your orders out for the day or something like that if you have to clean up.
And other things that we always have a home for, like the iPads that we pick orders on, have a little designated slot thing that they go in where they charge, and that's where they end every day at the end of the day, so that when you come in the next day, it's always there. The carts have a little bit of a location. There's kind of a couple of little corners they get stuffed in. Those obviously aren't too big, but even when it comes to that counter space, we have cups that we use for cataloging / counting pieces and stuff, and those have a designated spot. Once we pick orders and they get bagged, we have like A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. We have like another set of cups and trays and stuff that those go into so they can be verified, and those all have a designated spot. Even our picking things have a designated spot. We have a little bag tray that holds all the sizes of bags that we have. So it's overall, we're definitely not the most organized. It's a mess. It feels like a mess all the time. Although what I have noticed is whenever friends or someone walk in there, they're like, "Oh, it's so organized."
Honestly,
even though I look at it and I'm like, I feel like there's so much stuff everywhere.
I think a lot of that just has to do with the drawer units, though,
right, the
because
8,000 drawers
it inherently
on the wall.
looks organized when you have all these drawers with different colors and and stuff, until they go and open one of the drawers.
Right, and then they realize it's but yeah, everything has a home. Our tape dispenser has a place it sits in. The scale has a spot it sits in. For the most part, we don't have a lot of things where it's like, oh, in order to do a task, we have to take out these 5 things, set it up, then we can do our task, and then if we want to do a different task, we have to switch it and put it away. For the most part, it's like we have a designated kind of thing.
Tasks too have a home. I think this is something that we have talked about in videos before, but like, for example, if I was going to ship something, there's kind of an area on the desk, which is the shipping station. And if I'm reassigning or adding pieces, there's another desk, which is specifically for that. So that way we don't have to be competing for space. And obviously, if you're running a business all by yourself, that might be a little bit less of an issue in terms of, different people competing for the same spaces. But for us, it has allowed things to go so much faster because people are never in the way. Well, more rarely in the way.
We're always in the way, but we're not really in the way. It just feels like it.
We always need another computer station, but I feel like that's just always going to be the case.
Yeah.
Not too much we can do about that.
Yeah. Another thing with efficiency when it comes to like, everything having a home and stuff, that usually has people kind of driven into like this is how we do it. Whatever. And something we had to kind of adapt to is when we have people start coming in and picking orders, we realized, Paul and I had a method of how we picked orders and what we wanted to do and stuff, but we really needed to listen to the advice of the other people who were really actually now are in there every day picking orders. And kind of take their advice and be open-minded to the ideas that they might have when they're doing something, versus you and I just wanted to be like, oh, this is how we've done it. And of course, there's 2 sides to that. There is, we've had suggestions where we shut it down because they didn't understand the full function of how the store worked and why we did everything. But there's other things where it's like, okay, yeah, that's a great idea actually. Personally, I don't like it, but I don't really have a good reason for not liking it besides it's not what I want to do. But efficiency wise, yeah, it makes much more sense. And the biggest example of that was us leaving the drawers halfway on the wall when they're half empty. I don't like it, because there's drawers sticking off the wall for, the majority of the day until it gets all reassigned at the end of the day. But it made much more sense because the pickers coming in, they were also coming and picking more orders. Like the order volume has increased since you and I were picking every single day. So it makes sense for them not to pull those drawers off the wall when they're on their first pass of, 2 or 3 passes of orders throughout the day. And then it gets really difficult to pick orders when you're on your 3rd pass and now you have stacks of drawers over on the counter or something.
Yeah.
So that was like an example of something where, I really didn't like that idea, but it made much more sense to go with that direction versus a few other things where, they wanted to do the reassignment at the top of the day. And it was like, okay, we can't really do that because, the location, the remark for that piece is in a certain spot and we kind of needed it to not move if it had already been ordered. So there's give and take with that, but that's definitely something, is trying to be open-minded to ideas.
Totally. And part of that is also knowing when enough is when a suggestion, you don't need to take every suggestion, which we did kind of talk about. Like there was one suggestion of not having similar pieces in drawers that are nearby each other. And that would have been a logistic nightmare. Like having two similar pieces that are in the same drawer, that makes total sense. But having two pieces that are similar 3 drawers apart, not having that would be impossible.
Right, and trying to keep track of that, it would not be worth the time it takes to actually make that work.
And so, sure, it might increase efficiency by decreasing error rate, but it would not increase efficiency in terms of adding pieces. And so you have to be careful when increasing the efficiency of one task that you aren't decreasing the efficiency of your business as a whole.
Right.
Because you might be able to save a couple bucks in labor over here by decreasing time, but then you're making someone else's job, so much harder. And they're going to take, an extra hour to do it.
Yeah, and I think some stores get into a slight problem with this and I think we did a little bit as well, when you and I stopped doing every single task in the store and we started, other people became responsible for certain tasks and you and I don't do certain things now. It's a bad idea for you to just be like, oh, I don't want to do this, so I'll just push it to this person. Especially as you grow and you have more people and stuff. That really is not a great mindset of saying, I don't want to, I'll let them do it. Because overall for your entire store, it slows it down.
Yeah.
Another big thing, I think, in terms of efficiency, unless you had any other moments on that or any other thoughts on that, is understanding the true cost of supposed money savers. So, for example, if you're buying, let me try to think of an example here, but maybe you're buying really cheap shipping labels. And every time you peel the backing off, you buy a box of 500, we'll say, for $10. And every time you peel the backing off, there's a 50% chance it rips the label. Obviously, that's a really high percent chance. But and you end up throwing away 50% of these labels. Well, now, in terms of your 500 labels, if 50% of them, half of them are gone, you actually spent $20 for the 250 labels that you got, versus spending $20 spent $10 for 250, 20 for the 500, versus spending $20 for the 500 that you could get that never rip or whatever. And that's a weird example there, I think. Can't really think of what I'm trying to get, but think of what costs a quote unquote cheap amount of money.
I think a good example, and this is going to flow into something later, but when we got rid of the computer picking station and went to a cart, we used to do, this was a long time ago, but we had a computer set up at the end of the aisle, and we had a single pick sheet loaded there. So one order, this was back before multi-order picking, and we would look at the remark on a drawer, go down the aisle, grab the piece, come back to the computer, click the check mark, and go to the next one. And so we were running down the aisle 100 times. And technically, in one category, this was saving us money because we weren't buying a cart and an iPad. But really, it was costing the business as a whole a lot because we weren't able to pack orders quickly. If back then we were paying ourselves, we would not have
labor would have been
through the roof. Yeah. And so that's something where you might think, oh, you're saving money because I don't need to buy a cart. But is that, $50, $40, $100 cart really, I don't know what you're doing if you're spending, that on a cart, but
that's how much our carts are.
Aren't they like 60?
And they're $100.
Oh.
I mean, that's not too bad.
No, but okay, I guess $300 cart.
There you go.
Your time there, are you spending more than $100 in labor?
Right.
Taking care of all
there's
this?
A cost kind of analysis you want to do to determine how quickly does this get paid off? Does it make sense to do this? And generally, if you do that, you'll have a pretty solid understanding of, should I buy this for X amount or should I not buy this because it's going to take 7 years to pay off and it makes no sense or whatever.
Yeah. And now going the other way of, if you are running a larger store and you have employees that come in and they work, let's just say an 8-hour shift, and they clock in at a time and they clock out at a time, and they're not a contractor, so you're not going to send them home early or anything like that, but they finish their work for the day. if you just have them sit around or go home and keep paying them, then obviously you're wasting a lot of money there. And so having alternative activities that can be done is another way to boost efficiency, where efficiency is really defined as the, the usefulness of your dollar almost, I guess that's probably not the scientific definition here.
No.
But, it's kind of, if I have, $1 to spend, what's going to be, how am I going to maximize the return on that dollar, right? And if you are going to be spending that dollar anyway, then it would be best to be getting some return out of it. So while we don't do new anymore, some good ideas for stuff like that for our store might be like parting out sets. Cataloging is a bit more skilled labor, so we probably wouldn't pass that off unless someone had experience with that. But finding things, even if it's cleaning up, so long as there is actually something to clean up and they're not just straightening things that are already straight, just finding something for someone to do. It might sound like busy work, but if you're paying them anyway, I mean, ideally don't pay them, but if you're routinely running into something where every day people are sitting around, then maybe you need to shrink your labor force. But
then you have an issue. But
if it's only something that happens occasionally, unless you want to be the cool boss who once a month when there's extra time, send people home. But in the ideal world, you would have them doing something productive. So there's something there. And you need to keep that in mind with your own time too. Is if you aren't going to be doing anything super useful, you need to have a list of things, because you might not remember in the specific moment that this is something useful I can be doing.
I do that a lot, where I have an idea, in the morning or something, of I have these 4 things I have to do today. And then I do the first thing on the list, and then I finish whatever that is, and I'm now okay, I have 3 more things I know I was going to do, but I don't. That's another huge one, is writing just making a list, writing things down, understanding, I don't know if you want to call this a standard operating procedure type thing, but it's, to an extent, it's building that into the same concept of writing things down to keep track of things and to have an order as to which certain things go. I think that's a huge step, especially when you bring more people on. If it's just you and your business and that's all it is, make a list in terms of what you want to do for the day. Make a to-do list. But when you bring others on, there's a huge communication barrier that at least we have found when it comes to training people, and then really making sure they understand why they're doing stuff. Because I think obviously you can train someone and say, do this, do this, do this, do this. And, most people will do this, whatever. But a lot of people are still going to understand or want to understand why they're doing something. And that was a huge issue for us in terms of communicating that to contractors, employees, whatever it was, in terms of getting them to understand why we're doing something. Because sometimes it does feel like a really inefficient, weird way to do something. But there's a reason, usually. There's a reason behind it. And so if you have some sort of standard operating procedure where you have a guide now in terms of if you're training them or whatever, then you have, I think, an easier time explaining why you're doing stuff versus you have no plan going into someone being hired and you're just oh, this is what we do. Good luck or something. Yeah.
And that's totally, having a standard operating procedure is totally something that we have overlooked in the past, and now realize the true importance of, because first of all of our employees are smart people, but you might think the first time you hire someone that everyone's an idiot, because things that seem obvious to you aren't obvious, and you kind of need to check yourself. Because Evan and I had been doing this for 2 years before we brought people on. And so we had lots of things that just were total common sense and we didn't think about twice. And then we would get a little irritated when someone would not do those things. But really, it had never been written down and explained. And so when you are training someone, having something where it's a reference document that they can refer back to and you can refer back to makes it way easier to make sure that every little thing is explained in detail, because there is a point where you can drill down too far, but that point is actually pretty far out there in terms of
and it's a huge factor is depending on the size of your business too. If you have like 2 people that work with you and it's a 3-person thing, it's not it's not critical probably that you do this. But if you get 20, 30, 40, 50 employees, all of a sudden there's so many things that
you can't track at all.
There's so many layers to your company now that you, even as the owner, honestly probably don't know everything going on. So that's where you need to. So if you intend to grow whatever, your company is and stuff, as you grow, that will definitely need to be put into place.
And even for small businesses, something that there's a large age discrepancy between us and the pickers. And going back to the obvious thing, Evan and I have grown up with computers. We've used computers our entire lives, and we're pretty technically competent. And we overlook the fact that some people struggle with that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to hate on old people or anything like that, but we kind of just said we sat down and we showed them visually how to upload a BSX, or open a BSX and whatever. And for Evan and I, that probably would have been good, and it was not in this case. And
they needed more.
They needed
a couple times of that for sure.
And so I wrote out a play-by-play document with screenshots and everything, and even that was kind of a struggle. And one of our pickers wrote down basically how long it took them to learn this process, because they understood where Evan and I were struggling and getting a little frustrated with this. And they wanted to kind of increase the communication and stuff. So to kind of show us how long it took someone in their age group to learn this, for this particular picker, it took 20 repetitions until they could do it without referring to notes. And
another slight issue with this is it wasn't exactly in their standard day-to-day work.
That is true.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But totally something to think about is just the concept of experience level of whatever it is. Even if someone who you hire maybe, has experience working, let's say in fast food or the fast food industry or something, they may not now have a good concept of inventory management unless they were the one doing the inventory for the food back there. But if they were just the person at the cash register and sure, they worked for this company for 3 years and they were doing great, whatever, and they seem like a great applicant for what you're doing, they might not have that history and that understanding of inventory if you have, say, thousands of different items in your inventory. So that might be a learning curve too for them where, you just didn't expect that. And for you, you've been doing it for however many years, whatever, and you just get it and it seems like common sense. So there's that too in terms of, understanding that it's going to take people time. And I don't know if that's exactly in line with efficiency, but being able to train them in an efficient manner because you have a training manual or points, even something as simple as a list of everything you need to give them, which is essentially a training manual.
Well, something that I was circling around to in regards to how this loops into efficiency is know your employees. Now, obviously, if you're running a large business, your employees are going to be extremely diverse, at least hopefully. But if you're running an extremely small business and your hiring pool is very limited, and you're noticing a slant in terms of background skills, or age or experience in certain things, be aware of that and build your techniques and strategies around that, because there are lots of technological things that we could potentially take advantage of in our workflow that we don't, because the efficiency overhead on training might not necessarily be there. And so just, be aware of those things, and that what you had said in terms of explaining why something is very important, because people are going to remember something if they can attach it to other knowledge. If you just give someone a fact, think about a lot of people struggle in history class because they view it as, I'm doing air quotes, memorizing dates. But if you tell someone a story, like a really long story in oral format, right, where there's characters and stuff, I bet they're going to remember a lot of details. They might not remember the dates, but they're going to remember a lot of details. So if you're able to connect efficiency points and reasons why into a larger narrative, I'm not saying make a story. I'm just saying have your operating procedure be contextual. It might help increase efficiency and increase motivation, because I, at least me personally, I feel more motivated to do something when I feel like it's actually helping the organization.
Right. And when you can explain something to someone as well as to why you're doing something, for example, with the reason of like, we do it this way because we reduce mistakes or something, then that concept of now them, I don't want to say they're not scared of making a mistake, but that concept of them understanding that we do it this way because if we do it this other way, it makes more mistakes. That's even a simple reason that they're less likely to forget now than they would be if you just said we do it this way versus them trying something else.
Yeah.
And that's another thing with, understanding your mistakes, I think is a critical part in terms of being able to increase your efficiency.
Yeah.
If you don't understand why something's happening, you're not going to be able to fix it on the front.
People say you need to spend money to make money, and we will talk about that in a little bit, but you also need to spend time to save time. And developing not just standard operating procedures, but also, my apologies, my brain just died. What was it that you just said?
You understand reasons for making a mistake, or what the behind
yes.
Okay.
If you don't spend the time to sit down, spend the time to sit down with your business partner or with the employee making the mistakes, and I'm not talking about a hostile thing here, but just genuinely trying to get to the root of it and really questing for why. Take that 15 minutes or whatever and think about it and mull over it, because if you just say don't do it again, there are probably a lot of things where saying don't do it again is totally fine if it was just a random one-off mistake. But if there's a reason why, for example, if you're storing light bluish gray and white parts together in the same drawer and they keep getting mispicked, that's because sometimes the colors can be very difficult to tell apart on the iPad. And
right, and there's a quote unquote behind the scenes thing that can be changed to fix that versus someone just being lazy or something.
Correct.
And if you didn't realize and go to those drawers and look at what was in those drawers and realize that they're the same piece in just slightly different colors, and then you look at the pick sheet and find that issue, then you might forever have this issue. And long term, it's going to take more time to, when you're verifying the order, to look at it and be like, oh no, and then go put it away. Or maybe you don't realize and it goes out to the customer, and then the customer complains, as they should, and then you replace it and it costs you more money. A little bit of time spent there saves potentially a ton of headache in the future.
Yeah.
And then that's something else that you add to now your standard operating procedure is for catalogers. When you're, putting pieces in a drawer, you do not put this color with this color if it's in the same mold type or similar mold type, because, and then there's a reason, because then they can understand it versus just a random rule.
Yeah. And as I'd said about making money, you have to spend money to make money. Something that we come across a lot, and Evan and I have joked a little bit about it before, is a lot of people when they start off, and we were kind of in the same mindset when we first started, but a lot of people when they start off with a new business, they're kind of tight on money, especially if you're a younger entrepreneur. I don't think that there are very many 16, 17, 18 through 20-year-olds with $1 million just lying around, to start a business. But we and other people are very scared to spend money because money can be tight, or because spending money maybe has this implicit feeling of I'm defeating the point because I'm trying to make money.
Right.
I'm not too sure as to exactly where a lot of this comes from, but it is very true that you need to spend money to make money, because either you're spending money or you're spending time. And I feel like we've talked about this before, but if you're spending time, you are spending money, because instead of spending that time, you could be working a 9 to 5, right? So,
well, not even that. If you're spending time doing something that is like incredibly inefficient, maybe you're not spending an exact dollar, but you're spending your time, which equals a potential dollar.
Yeah.
Because your time could be used, maybe you're picking orders and you're doing it really, really slow for whatever reason, because you're being inefficient, and it takes you 100% more time. It takes you twice the amount of time that it should, for you to pick those orders. If you did it in the short amount of time because you were being more efficient, well, now you can spend, that extra hour, let's say you had, adding parts.
Yeah.
And if in that hour you can add $500 worth of parts, that is a potential $500 that your business can make later. Obviously, it's not like a one-to-one return like that. Some things could sit forever, yada, yada, yada. You still have labor costs of picking. But overall, there's that concept of like potential money that is being earned, or potential earned income, which is like
the point.
On the way. Yeah. Like it's getting to that point versus just being really, really slow with something else.
And someone is probably going to bring up, well, I don't pay myself. And the answer to that is the goal is to eventually do that.
Right.
And so if you're spending inefficient time now, sure, you might not be paying yourself and losing money there now, but you are essentially losing future money. And one major way to efficiently spend money is by buying the correct tools for the job.
Yes.
Because if you can spend $100 and then save 100 hours, I mean, if we're factoring in the California minimum wage of $15.50, that's a lot of money.
Right.
And so be aware of that. And this is something that we definitely take to heart. Evan and I love to spend money, maybe a little bit too much.
Yes.
But some purchases that we have made in the name of efficiency have definitely been worth it, including some that I've been very skeptical on.
Well, the biggest one, I think by far, are the carts.
Yeah.
Like, not even comparable to anything.
Correct.
And that was something for a long time that was just that concept, like I started talking about, half an hour ago when we started, was that desire to just not want to change, or that desire to not want to increase something because it seems weird, where you have to spend a little bit of money. The carts were a massive, massive change. We got a cart and we just used an iPad that we already had, but the cart was that big purchase of $100. And when you were only making, $2,500 a month or whatever it was at the time, that's enough money to make you, a little concerned, because it's like, oh, that's kind of big. But it's totally worth it. Another thing we did was way from the very beginning was a counting scale. And we probably did buy this too early on. But I think it's good that we bought it early on. Maybe we could have waited a couple months, but a counting scale will save you hours of time when it comes to actually, if you have the quantity of parts.
Depending on what part you're uploading, it might save you hours in a day.
It could, yeah, that's true. And that is an incredible increase in efficiency if you just utilize the right tools there. Another thing we got recently-ish, I guess it's been a few months actually, is a tape dispenser that cuts, and this is a little extra, but it cuts.
That was the thing that I got when Evan bought this. I was like, I was a little irritated.
Yeah, but
and then I saw the bill on the Uline invoice, and I got a little bit more irritated because I've been doing the budget recently. But it's totally worth it. You can continue.
And over time, it pays for itself for a few reasons. One, it gives us the precise amount of tape that we actually need versus us taping it with whatever we're using. It also is cheaper to replace that tape. We can also potentially in the future, if we want, we can get custom printed tape. I don't know if we'll go there, but that's an option.
As much as I got mad about the tape dispenser, I really want.
You
custom
really want the
printed
custom tape? Yeah,
I really do.
I don't actually, but and then another thing is it saves a lot of time actually. Versus because it's in a specific spot on the desk, it has preset buttons or preset like lengths for each box that we have. You just press it and it sticks out the piece that you need. It is a little extra for sure, but it'll last us forever theoretically. And we're not wasting tape. The tape's cheaper. A big thing for me was that the tape is now recyclable. It's paper tape. It is not the plastic tape. And then, of course, it actually is a little bit quicker because
way cheaper too, right?
The tape's cheaper, correct? Yeah, when you buy it in bulk, obviously. But and it's easier. That's another thing. It saves time. So over time, it'll be more efficient. That's probably potential. I mean, there's been zero efficiency things. Well, no, actually, we bought a new iPad recently, and compared to the other one, it's not crazy faster, but it is It's
probably
something
saves 30 seconds to a minute a day.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I have no way of knowing that. I mean, I guess we could. But in terms of the load time, the just clicking a line to like select the item as picked, like it's much quicker, and that's the thing that's used daily, multiple times a day. So that will save time. And that's kind of one of those costs where we had to eventually anyway. So, yeah, but definitely using the right tools for the job versus, you know, and this is kind of what we talked about a minute ago, is knowing the kind of quote unquote supposed money savers. If they're not really saving you money because you're just cheaping out on them, that's kind of similar to spending the right money on the right tool for whatever that job actually is.
Yeah, it basically boils down to, do you want to spend money or time? And if you want to be efficient, sometimes it's better to spend money to just get it done.
Yeah, that's very true. So in terms of what we kind of outlined, those are the things that we talked about for the overall store that's kind of related to the inventory, what we do with the process of XYZ, and then you sell the piece or you sell the item. There's a few other things. One big thing that we had spent a lot of time on in the early-ish days, I would say. And really, we didn't actually have a lot of meetings in the early days, but I would say later on, okay, there's no way to transition this.
That's because you already started.
Paul doesn't want to talk about meetings, so we're gonna go to some things that we do now.
I just felt it would flow better, but you were a little, no offense, and you were a little slow on the uptake.
You highlighted it.
I did highlight it.
Yeah, but okay, go for it, Paul. You ruined it.
Thank you. I do my best. My transitions are legendary. So this is so much for a professional podcast. So some things that we do now in the store. These are obviously going to be a little bit closer to the Lego BrickLink store, but maybe if you run a different type of business, you can get some inspiration. Is we've started adding directly into partially filled drawers. This is a pretty new thing. And obviously it does take, a little work with consolidation, but if we just grab unfilled drawers off the wall, so they have some pieces in them, but they're not full, rather than going through all of the time of reassigning, we just open a BSX and put the pieces that don't need to be consolidated and where there's not a lot of them directly into those drawers without emptying the drawers first and going through this whole process. And that obviously saves a lot of time. And that is way more efficient than emptying every drawer just to fill it back up again.
Right. And that's, of course, that's something we've done on and off, but we haven't done at a large-ish scale like we are now.
Yeah.
Mostly, the reason that we're able to do that is just because we have so many things coming back from catalogers now versus you cataloging in the house. So something that kind of has changed slightly is Paul's back in the garage adding things. Which makes it a little bit easier to be able to add into those half drawers because we don't have to pull the half drawers into the house. Because if we had to pull, we can call that almost off-site. It's really not, but if we're trying to pick an order and we have to go to drawer 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and it's in the house with you, that's just a huge inefficiency there. So you being in the garage and us getting back enough things from catalogers has really helped to allow that to happen. Where we don't have to reassign as much, just since we're not making complete empty drawers, we're instead, adding halfway into the second half of the drawer.
Yeah. Another thing that we've been doing that this is not quite done yet, we're still in the process, is data collection. We're doing a lot of data collection right now. Over the last week or two, we've been doing kind of a budget overhaul, hoping to go into we're already in 2023, hoping to continue 2023 with a much more detailed idea of exactly what our COG, I mean, we do know, but we kind of want to know, what is the exact cost of this order with its specific size, and what is the exact cost of everything we're doing. And there'll be more content on that later once we're done.
Right. How much does the box cost, the label cost, the tape cost, the effort to print out the label, the labor to
correct an error based off of our average error chance.
Exactly.
And how deep do we want to go into verification, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of factors that kind of just get ignored or estimated. But collecting data to do that has also opened up a lot of efficiency things. Evan had suspected. How long did you think it would took you to email a customer about an error?
So I thought probably about 30 seconds to a minute. And then we timed it with me going actually like fast. Like in this little meeting we were having, I was like actually typing it really, really quickly, and it took me a minute.
So that's double the time.
Well, yeah, and if I wasn't going fast because I wasn't like trying to beat the clock essentially, then that could take 1.5 to 2 minutes versus that 1 minute or 30 seconds that I thought it took. Big difference there. What I'm actually really close to doing is just making one of our signatures, the template, and then we just type in the piece that's missing, and then we're done.
Yep, and that would say so. Something that we thought was not a huge efficiency sink, ended up being a time sink, and we didn't know that if we didn't collect data. So obviously, you can collect too much data, because if you're spending 80% of your day collecting data, and you're doing that for weeks and weeks, unless you really need that data, maybe
unless that's your sole job.
Yeah.
There's data collectors out there.
Yeah, totally. But like right now, I have a sheet going where I'm tracking the amount of bags of each type and boxes correlated to lot and piece count for every order. And I'm not going to do that forever. I'm just going to do it long enough until I feel that I have enough data to get a good, a good equation.
Yeah, and at the scale we're going, it's probably only going to be a week or so, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 2 weeks. If we're only shipping 6 orders a month or a week, then that wouldn't be enough time. But fortunately, we're doing 100-ish or whatever it is. So within a week or two, you have a decent enough sample size to be able to determine something.
And how that connects to efficiency is timing like your catalogers timing your catalogers, timing your pickers. There's a large debate as to stuffing drawers versus not stuffing drawers, as in like putting many, many pieces in there. And you definitely do save some time by putting multiple pieces in there, but I bet you there is a meeting point where putting too many different lots in there does slow it down.
Right.
And if you vary it up in your inventory and some drawers are more packed than others, and then you track it, you should be able to figure out what that golden number is. And obviously you don't want to waste too much time perfectly getting to that golden point every time. But if you kind of make that your standard operating procedure, then maybe you're going to save some time and money there.
Yeah, and that's a hard one too, determining how full a drawer could be, because obviously certain pickers have a slightly different method of how they might pull a piece out of a drawer. If they see it on the top, they're just going to pull it. If it's not on the top, of course, they have to dump it out. So there's a lot of variance with that too, versus like an order uses this box. That's pretty straightforward. Yeah, so that's a harder one to collect. Another thing that we've been trying to do now, and we're having a little bit of a hard time doing it, is giving an incentive for having like an efficient worker or something. And part of the reason we're having an issue with that is because there's the two things, there's obviously the efficiency of the speed of the worker in terms of how quickly they get a task done, but there's also the quality of the task that they do. And we need to find a balance between the speed at which, say, a picker picks an order versus how accurate that order is. And that's why we're having a slight issue with finding an incentive for them being, efficient in their task, because
it's not just speed.
If we're just trying to speed them up, we could accidentally incentivize them to mispick items because it feels like they're going quicker.
And then we're paying the verifier more.
Right, and then it's just taking more time in the long run. That would be another thing we need to figure out is, does it make more sense for someone to mispick an item because they're trying to go fast and then the verified to fix it, or does it make more sense for them to do it right and the verified doesn't do anything besides check it? Ideally, we don't have to have a verification process. I'm sure that's not going to happen, but yeah.
That is actually a point I have on here. I don't think it's in this category, but accepting an acceptable error rate. In the perfect world, all of your orders are perfect. But is the time and money to have a 0% error rate worth it? Because, if you have a 0.1% error rate, that's pretty good. That's that's an imaginary number almost. But going from that to 0% is almost just like for completionists getting the achievement, right? It probably doesn't actually do anything, and it probably costs more money. So if you look at, if you're keeping your data and you track your errors and you figure out what causes errors and how you can eliminate those errors and what the most cost effective places to fix errors are, and then you do all that, and then you figure out what your new error rate is, you then need to really ask yourself, how much are these errors costing me?
Mm-hmm.
And is that okay? And it's okay by fixing it would cost more.
Right. And another thing, kind of talking about error rate as well as the needing to spend money earlier, is there are points at which, someone may email you and say, hey, it says it was delivered, but it's not at my porch or whatever. And it's like, if that's a $15 or $30 order even, it's like, it may cost you less in terms of all the time and stuff to just say, okay, we'll send a new one out or whatever, versus try to go through the post office and claim insurance and X whatever. It might not be worth your time, even though, that is probably the right way to do it. But, if you reship this $30 order and the customer gets it and they're happy and they're done with it, sure, it was $30 that you lost, but like, at the end of the day, your customer's happy. You didn't waste a whole lot of time, and you're probably fine. Obviously, if it's a really simple claim on insurance or something, then do that. But if it's this whole big ordeal that takes, it's a week-long process to figure out, or 2 weeks or 3 weeks before you can make all these claims.
Speaking from recent experience here.
Right, and like go through all these steps to get something to happen, it might just be worth refunding that customer just to call it done, even though, you're essentially tossing that money out the window, but it's going to cost you more in time and money to actually fix this issue. So that's a hard one to do, obviously, because it really does feel like you're just throwing money away, and you kind of are, but sometimes that's what you have to do.
Do you really want to spend 30 hours trying to get through to a real human on UPS support?
And obviously, it's
only
not
to
going to take
find
that
out
long, but
there are no real humans on UPS support.
Yeah. So that's a hard one too, with having errors and stuff. Obviously, I think most people are on that page of like, if they email you about one missing thing, you just send it out and it's easy. But find that value of which an error costs you. And if it's cheaper to just pay someone to verify the orders and reduce that error rate by like 75%, then you're probably just saving money that way then, versus having all these customers reach out. We've had another discussion about like trying to determine the value of a customer getting a proper order versus an improper order. And I really have no clue even how to value that.
No, it basically has to determine with how many times a customer needs to receive a bad order before they decide that they don't want to spend money with you anymore.
Exactly. And the hard thing with BrickLink is customers aren't always like loyal to a store. It's kind of like, oh, this store has my parts, so that's why there's this weird flip-flop. If you were the only supplier of X product, then of course it could be a little easier, but that is quite a challenging thing. Do you give me permission to go into my meeting section now?
I do.
Okay. So something that we started with early on, when we were having meetings, like I had said, we didn't have meetings a lot in the first year, probably. We'd talk or whatever, but it really wasn't serious where it was like, we need to sit down and figure this out. But once we started having meetings for various things, we at the beginning were wasting a lot of time. Whether it was like a little argument that we would get into, trying to pick a side or whatever it was, or we would just say, okay, we're going to meet at like 10-ish, and we would meet, and we would just let the meeting go until forever. And obviously if you don't have a business partner, this is, maybe not as important, but eventually if you have more employees and stuff, you'll have meetings for projects and different things as well. But catching ourselves on tangents was a really big one. When we started, it was just, let's meet about this. And it was such a broad topic versus now where it's like, this meeting is to do this.
Yeah.
And we have a topic for that meeting and kind of an agenda too. Coming into a meeting with an agenda is really, really important, I think, where you have a concept of what you want to accomplish in that meeting. We met the other day to hammer out these kind of outlines for this before we were going to shoot it today. And, we went in with, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. If we got on a tangent about something that didn't matter or wasn't related, you and I will both call each other out now and say, does this matter? Whatever. If we're really arguing about something because we're both so stubborn that we can't let it go.
Happens a lot.
we will just be like, okay, we need to let this go. And then 2 days later, whatever, we come back to it and it doesn't matter even.
We've switched sides.
Right. Now we're arguing both for the opposite thing. So, stopping ourselves there. A hard thing to do because we're not great at it yet, but a really important thing would be if you schedule a meeting for 1 hour, just do your 1 hour. If it's an hour and 2 minutes, sure. But don't go an hour and a half just because you were a little inefficient at the beginning. Don't let the meetings linger on and on and on.
Now, there is something to be said. If you're on a roll, then obviously don't end it because you're going to lose the efficiency of being in the middle of the brainstorm. But if you really aren't accomplishing anything, don't fall for this, the sunk cost fallacy of I've already wasted an hour. I might as well waste 2.
Right. Yeah, there's that for sure. Just if you're done, just be done. There's no problem in saying, okay, we got to stop here. Let's figure it out later.
The other thing, and this has become something that we've been doing, especially as we've had to meet with people who aren't just Evan and I, is excusing yourself. Evan and I are there because we own the business, right? We have the ability to just leave a meeting, and that is something that we do. Well,
what do you mean?
So let's just say I don't need to be. You guys are talking.
Saying. We're talking about something. Okay.
Yep. And I realize I haven't been talked to in 10 minutes, and I don't foresee myself being talked to again, or I'm not really providing anything of value. Sure, it might be more entertaining and more relaxing for me to sit in the chair and watch, but the real question is I could be adding pieces right now. And so I'll basically just interject and say, do I need to be here? And a lot of times, ouch, the answer is no. But it goes both ways, right? And
yeah, totally.
Then I just get up and leave. And you might think, oh, your first instinct, especially if you're in a table meeting, with 8 people or whatever, that's rude. But really, I mean, you're saving, even if this kind of even goes to working at other people's companies.
I mean, it really depends what position you're in though. Yeah,
totally. But, obviously know your boss, but if you don't need to be wasting company money and you can be doing your quote real job, do you really need to be there? And ask in a non-sassy way, would it be more effective right now if I was spending my labor hours working on X project, right? And then excuse yourself, assuming that that's okay. And that can save so much time because there have been times where a meeting ends up going on for 3 or 4 hours and it's productive for everyone else. But after the first hour, I realize I'm not needed, so I get up and leave. And then I spend 3 hours out of those 4 being productive in the garage.
Right. And with that too, kind of tagging onto that, you will be updated on what happened in the meeting.
Exactly.
And a really critical part in that update process, or just really any process at all, is taking notes during the meeting.
Yes.
And we are not phenomenal at this.
No.
We've gotten better, I think, but we do have a hard time, having a designated person be like, okay, we need to write this down because we will forget. But that's so important to take notes and understand what you did in that meeting. And then on top of that, discuss for the last 2-3 minutes of that meeting. Let's say this is if it's a standalone thing about one thing you're doing tomorrow, then of course it's fine. But if it's a project that you're working on long term or something and you're going to meet next week or in 2 weeks or whatever, take the last 5 minutes to really not only sum up what you talked about, but also build a bullet point list of what's the basic outline for next time's meeting.
Yeah.
And have a concept of what you're doing next time versus just saying, okay, we'll meet next Tuesday. All right, see you guys. And then you come into that Tuesday not knowing, or someone needs to spend all their time trying to figure out an agenda for that meeting, for hours, or maybe not hours, but for some time before that meeting. And if you didn't have meeting notes, then now you're trying to figure out what you talked about doing next time and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. So tagging on to that, always schedule your next meeting before people leave.
Yes.
Going exactly against what I just said, but don't let the important people walk out before you have their commitment that they're going to be here next time. Because if you own a business and they're 9 to 5 and they come in, they're probably going to be on site. But if you're working with contractors or anybody who's not already on site, getting them back into that room might be very difficult. This is a constant struggle with shooting podcasts, especially after hours, is finding a time where everyone's available is impossible. And this really goes for meetings, is if the meeting's important enough to happen again, then you should put it on the calendar before. Because here's the thing, if you put it on the calendar and someone can't make it, you can then reschedule. But it's going to be way harder to get that commitment if it's not scheduled in the first place.
Yeah, and it's so much easier when everyone's in the same room to say, okay, are we all available to meet next Monday, versus like a text thread or something.
And then someone just disappears.
Yeah.
It's a huge pain.
Especially, like, we've never had a meeting with more than like 4 people, 5 people maybe.
Not for just a brick in the bucket, but for previous projects.
For other stuff we have. But like, you know, if you're trying to commit to a meeting with like 8, 10, 12 people or something, so a lot of people from different places can be updated, that if they're not all working the same hours and stuff for this, that could be a challenge.
Now this goes, I just want to throw this in there, but you've done a lot of virtual meetings, and I used to do a lot of virtual meetings, and I remember that they were never very efficient. Do you still find that to be the case now that you do them semi-frequently?
The hard thing with virtual meetings for me, like if there's like 2 or 3 people who are in charge for that meeting and you have 10 other people who are just listening in, it's not an issue. What becomes difficult for me is when there's like 10 people in a meeting and everyone is supposed to give input on whatever topic it is. That's where it becomes hard for me. Obviously, the world today has moved into a much more virtual meeting type thing. A lot of people aren't going back to the offices, you know, whatever it is. But I still prefer an in-person meeting unless it's a small meeting with 3 or 4 people. If it's more people than that, for me, it just becomes very difficult when you're supposed to have 10 people talking. That's hard. Obviously, corporations do it all the time. Big companies do it. So it's not like it's actually an issue. I just prefer that in-person meeting, being able to talk to someone, see their face, you know, reaction when something's happening. It's very easy for someone to jump into a concept then. Even when I'm in a virtual meeting, I don't feel like I want to say my ideas as much as I would if I was at a table with the other 6 people.
It's way harder to know when to interrupt, and that's something I already struggle with. So
right.
I hate. I don't hate. I would rather have an in-person meeting.
Yeah.
Because I do find them to be way more efficient.
Yeah. No, it does feel more efficient as well. But I think there's that question of, is it efficient to pay for an office versus just have everyone call in?
Circling back around to writing notes. You are going to forget. I just really want to drill in the note thing, especially because we really need to drill in the note thing.
Right, because we are going to forget.
But
you know what, let me take a note of that right now, that we need to take notes during meetings. Or we'll forget.
But having someone, now it's really hard when you can't afford to have someone who is like specifically, you know, a transcriptionist or specifically a note taker, and that's what they're there for, and they don't really contribute. When everyone is contributing, it can be way harder to take notes because your brain is actually comprehending and thinking up responses to everything that's being said. But if everyone is kind of collectively taking notes, you know, maybe it's more likely that something will get hit on. Also, text to speech is just something that I have been procrastinating taking care of for a long time. Is a lot of phones now, especially my Pixel, not sponsored or anything, but I have a Pixel. It has this meeting transcription feature where it will even be able to differentiate between who's saying what.
Yeah, I really want to see that work.
And so I just need to sit down and set it up. And so that way we can get a transcript of every meeting. And with the Chat GPT thing that's going on right now, I feel like it wouldn't be that hard to just have that get fed into that, you know, and then get notes out of the transcript. Because obviously reading through a 3-hour transcript is not going to be a productive use of everyone's time.
Of course
as
not.
your source of meeting notes. But
yeah, but also like, you know, most meetings, I think you need 10 bullet points of what you really talked about, and that's probably good enough.
Action items. Do we want to talk about action items real quick, or is that more of a meetings?
Yeah.
Okay. So walking away with everyone assigned to a task, not creating busy work, but I mean, if a task needs to get done, it should have a name.
Right. It shouldn't just be give it to someone versus just say, okay, we will do this.
Yep.
No one knows what that means.
Yep. Look someone in the eye and tell them, hey, you're
your
doing
job.
this. And that's going to increase the chance that it's going to be done. Because if there's no concrete list of action items, the stuff is going to be forgotten. And then maybe you will have scheduled this meeting for nothing because nothing's done.
Yeah, that is true. I think the last kind of major topic we'll catch on here is taking your time, and this almost ties back to the very beginning actually, but really taking your time to get organized for a variety of reasons. A big thing that this can help with getting organized, and something it's helped us with, is like reducing redundancies or something. Like you're not doing the same thing twice that you maybe would have been doing if you weren't thinking about it in an efficient manner. We don't pick an order and then go pack it and ship it, and then go pick another order and then pack it and ship it, and pick another one and pack it and ship it. And that's obviously very common sense. It wouldn't make sense to drive to the post office and drop one off and then come home. Like that's a complete, way far out there. But like we pick the majority of our orders at once, and then we do the verification at once and the packing, and then obviously it all gets shipped together, versus doing it one by one. That's something that we found where it doesn't, we're not sure every task is still being done. We're not actually doing the task twice, but it's like it's improving efficiency because we're clustering, like you just said.
Yeah. And once you're in the verification mode or the picking mode, it's better to just stay in that mode and get it all done.
Yeah. There is a mindset, and maybe this is something where running a business on your own, you might want to have variance in tasks. And we've talked about that too with, I don't remember which episode it was. Burnout. Yeah. It's just don't do the same thing over and over and over and over again. But changing it up does help. But there is for sure that mindset of like, I'm going to catalog for the next 4 hours versus, I have 20 minutes. I'm going to catalog and then I have to go pack. And then I have to come back and catalog. It's just like, that's too much hopping around because there's that mindset, that mode that you're changing out of.
That said, in terms of burnout and stuff, is there does come a point where you maybe should switch tasks because you're no longer efficient. I mean, obviously orders is a little different because orders need to go out. But if it's another task and you're noticing that you're really slowing down and just drinking some coffee isn't going to fix that, then yeah, it probably is worth your time to go take 10, 20 minutes and just go do something else still productive. Like I just have a bin of fig parts that I sort through, that I've been working on for like ever now. But if I just need to like go take a break from something, I will come and sort some fig parts because it's very mindless. And yeah, that's an important thing too of efficiency, is making sure that you're not decreasing efficiency by being done with the task. Now, part of that is just, grow up and do the task, but there does come a point where you no longer can do that because your brain is just tired.
Right.
So,
yeah. I think overall, if we had to pick one big thing to say with efficiency, it would be get organized, right? Get organized / be organized. Get organized and know your data. I think, because I don't think you can get organized without knowing what's going on. Yeah. I mean, do you have any other ideas as to maybe things that we do or whatever about improving how we've improved our efficiency? Obviously, we've talked about it, I think, on the first episode of this was contractors and how that all works. That was a huge efficiency increase in terms of like scaling up and building out this process for being able to efficiently do a task at a much larger scale. We do have a video called, I think it's 5 tips for running a more efficient store. If I remember correctly, it does actually have some good tips, which a lot of that is much more BrickLink focused. But if you are running, a BrickLink store, that might be good to check out. Because some of the things that we talk about is like packing drawers, and I guess we talked about that here, but setting up an efficient pick path, and being aware of how much time you're spending on each individual thing. Like a lot of it for me really does circle back to data, because I don't like not knowing things, and I feel like if I don't know that this is taking time, I might not be as motivated to try and shrink that time. So don't be scared of knowing
don't be scared to fix don't be scared to fix your mistakes. I think is really a big one. You might be worried that it's going to end up in this rabbit hole, but if it saves you money in the long run.
Right. And don't get stuck on things that
you can't fix.
No, well, sure. But don't get stuck on things that you just want to do for no reason. You know, if you're really trying to grow a business, there have to be things you give up. And some of that could be little tasks within the business that you enjoy doing. You might have to give those up because it makes no sense to do them at the scale you're doing it or whatever it might be. You know, I'm sure the little bakeries that start out, they love using the small stand mixers or something at some point. But once you grow a brand enough, you need to go to one of the, whatever they're called, where they make it for you. The pack pre, whatever that's called, where they make it and they package it all up for you and stuff. And you no longer are doing the actual cooking, but to grow your business, you had to let that go. So keep that in mind as well. There will be things you have to give up. You know, but of course, if you want to stay at a certain size, you know, that's all good too.
Yep.
If you own your little cabinet shop, you may never have to give up making your cabinets. If you don't want to grow and mass produce cabinets, it's really not a good example.
When are you going to make cabinets for like the kitchen or something? I feel like those need a little fix up.
Yeah, for some reason this cabinet thing I've been on for the past couple episodes.
When the store moves out, we can put up a cabinet shop
in the garage.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
All right, guys. I think that's we're losing some efficiency in our topics here. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of BrickSide Chat. If you are unaware of our YouTube channel, please go check us out. YouTube, just a brick in the bucket, and give us a like, leave a comment down below on the channel, something that makes sense.
And let us know what you have done to increase your efficiency, or maybe what you've noticed you don't want to change, even if it slows you down a little bit.
Yeah.
I just watched a video, and this will come out in a week and a half, so the video's been out a couple weeks, but like Ralph's Bricks just redid his layout of stuff, which I think he had mentioned would help to increase efficiency in the layout of it and stuff, and getting more organized and stuff. So yeah.
Also, check us out on, I just cannot talk today. If you haven't heard of our YouTube channel, just a brick in the bucket, please go ahead and head on over there to the video, leave a comment. We would love to hear what kinds of things you've been efficient about, as well as any ideas for future episodes. We're always looking for ideas on all the different kinds of topics that you want to hear about, business related stuff, preferably. Also, if you are on YouTube and you want to listen to this in the car or whatever without all those continuous ad breaks, you want to be able to turn off your screen and not pay for YouTube Premium, you can go check us out on probably your favorite podcast listening service. We're probably on there.
Yeah, we're on a lot of them. Apple, Google, Spotify, and like probably a dozen other ones that I don't remember the names for.
Yep. So go ahead, check us out there, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for watching or listening.
Goodbye.